Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, later this afternoon, NFL Divisional Round. All the coverage starts at 4 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. And joining us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, make sure you're following him on Twitter. You haven't all year round. Well, you should be already. At Mike Clay NFL, covers the NFL, prognosticator extraordinaire. You can catch all of his work on the ESPN Plus, also the DFS podcast. You catch him on Daily Wager Sunday morning as well on ESPN2. And he's kind of joining us, like I said, on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, how you doing this weekend?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for this week, and we'll see if we can match the wild card round, right? Like everyone always looks forward to the divisional round, but the wild card round was fantastic this year, other than the Eagles game when Carson Wentz went down with that injury early on. So we'll see if the divisional round with all this talent on the field can match up.
I'm glad you mentioned the what happened with Eagles and Carson Wentz, because before we get to the divisional games, I just wanted to ask you, just kind of give your synopsis on the Eagles season, what happened to them this offseason. I think a lot of people have kind of been taking what do they really need to focus on, what do they not need to focus on, just kind of give your synopsis on what happened this season and what the team needs to do for next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of what they did in the offseason didn't work out, right? I mean, some of the moves they made the free agent moves, obviously the draft, other than, a couple, certainly Miles Sanders was a hit, and, other players played roles, but it was a rough offseason. A lot of the veteran additions especially just did not pan out. And then the injuries, right? I mean, listen, you can say all you want that injuries are an excuse, but they're a legitimate excuse in the NFL when they really start to pile up. I mean, if you look at teams that have a very strong unit, whether it's offense or defense, and it's still strong all season long and into the playoffs, well, usually you're going to look across that team and you're going to say, well, wow, nobody's hurt. Think about the Bills, right? Think about the Vikings, even the Patriots to some extent. They were fantastic defensively, even into the playoffs. Because they didn't really have injuries. And, you see a team like the 49ers just totally dominate for half the season, and then the defense kind of, fell apart a little bit down the stretch with a bunch of guys hurt. Now those guys are back healthy for their playoff run. Well, for Philadelphia, they didn't really have a chance, right? I mean, you lose 40% of your offensive line, all of your skill position players for the most part, at least the top guy at those positions. Ertz misses time. Obviously, Howard, the three receivers. I mean, it's really hard to overcome those things. And then your veteran additions don't pan out. You have an injury here or there with like a Bradham at the corners on defense. It was really hard for them to overcome. Honestly, most teams that would have injuries at that rate wouldn't come close to the playoffs. So it was kind of a miracle that they got there. I know playing in the NFC East helped them, but they did have to win 4 straight games down the stretch against, teams that were healthier to get there. So, and honestly, if Wentz didn't get hurt, they may have won a playoff game as well. In fact, they probably would have, the way that game transpired. So they need to address the quarterback position aggressively this offseason. Need to get some youth at safety. Obviously, that's becoming a red flag. They're going to continue to be strong up front defensively. Obviously, they need to revamp a wide receiver as well. So really the perimeter, I guess, on both sides of the football should be the primary areas of attack for them. But I do think the Eagles can come strong back next season, just because there is a lot of talent on this roster. And I'm a believer in Carson Wentz. I think the guy's the real deal.
It was interesting that the Eagles they got rid of both Mike Rowe and Carson Wentz, the offense coordinator, wide receiver coach, but they kept the quarterback coach. Is that maybe a sign to you that the Eagles are happy with the progress that Wentz made this year, but they want to upgrade the offense overall for next year?
I think the only people worried about Carson Wentz are outside of the NovaCare complex. You know what I mean? I think they're fully convinced he's the guy, else they wouldn't have given him that contract extension, even with the injuries that he was dealing with. And we've seen that on the field. I mean, this guy, he had a bump in the road there when everybody got hurt, and it was like the first game where it was like Jordan Matthews and Greg Ward. I think it was right around the Seattle game, kind of in that area where he was kind of struggling and missing throws. And then you're like, well, this is just going downhill fast. We know he's good, but he just doesn't have the help, and it's not going to work out. But then, there was a little bit of chemistry. They got the routes down, and suddenly, I'm not saying they were lighting up the NFL, but, he was pushing for 300, 350 yards. They were scoring touchdowns, and they were winning football games. So, I just think that he's not the problem. He has developed fine. He's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. He's not Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or peak Tom Brady, but he doesn't need to be, right? He's a top 10 NFL quarterback, maybe a little better than that, and they can win with him as long as they have a decent supporting cast, not an AAF supporting cast, which is what he had to deal with for about half of the season.
Right. All right, Mike, let's look at these games. Of course, today you have the first game is going to be the Vikings versus the 49ers. I think one of the big deals to me is that this 49ers team had the opportunity to get refreshed, get healthy. I know they dealt with some injuries at different points this year, and it feels like that to me this game is going to come down to the 49ers defensive line versus the Vikings offensive line's ability to hold up.
Certainly. I think the 49ers are, I have them as a 7-point favorite. So I guess compared to the other games this week, that might actually be a closer game. Certainly two of them are looking at double-digit spreads or in that range. So this might be one of the closer ones. But I do think the Niners get it done. As mentioned earlier, they're getting healthier defensively. They're going to have Quan Alexander back for this game. Richard Sherman's obviously back after he missed a little time late. Dee Ford should be mixed into the rotation. So getting those guys all back together and healthy should be huge for slowing down this Vikings offense that has been kind of all over the place this season, from going to a point where they're really struggling to being absolutely elite. There's like a month where Kirk Cousins was the best quarterback in the NFL and then kind of regressing back to kind of normal down the stretch. But nonetheless, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up. And we know the Niners run the ball effectively. Jimmy Garoppolo has been very good this season. The defense is outstanding. They're at home. There's just a lot working in their favor. So, and not to mention that they have a terrific offensive line that should be able to deflect some of that terrific Vikings pass rush. So I do think the Vikings fall short by about a touchdown in this game.
Mike Clay joining us on Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. Let's flip it over to the nightcap. Titans versus Ravens. Do you play anything? Do you have any factor believing in the Dean Pease, former Ravens coordinator, also the Ravens guy when they played the 49ers with the Greg Roman offense with Colin Kaepernick? Do you think that plays into any of this game tonight?
I don't think so. I think the Ravens handled this one pretty easily. Look, the Titans have scored a lot since Ryan Tannehill took over. I mean, they've been almost keeping pace with this Lamar Jackson offense since he took over as the starter. But we saw them kind of struggle to find the end zone or to move the ball, honestly, through the air against New England last week. They didn't score many points in that game, and the Ravens defense has been one of the best in the league in the second half of the season. So it's another tough challenge on the road for this team. And I know they're going to try to run the ball, and I know it worked against the Patriots, but look, the Patriots can't score either. They've had a really hard time scoring points down the stretch, and that's why the Tennessee was able to get the lead and run the ball as often as they wanted to. I mention all that because I don't think they're going to be able to in this game. The Ravens offense is too good. Lamar Jackson on his own is averaging almost 3 touchdowns per game. So if the Titans are not ahead, and again, I feel like that's unlikely, they're going to have to throw the ball. It's going to be in Tannehill's hands. And if he doesn't get it done against a revamped and outstanding secondary, this could be a blowout. It honestly could. So I have it 32-21 in favor of the Ravens. I think they get an early lead behind Jackson, who is well rested after sitting out for quite a while, and they run away with this one. So I don't know if the coaching outside of the coaching on the Tennessee side is going to make much of a difference. I think John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, and company, I think they win this one with ease.
Sunday slate, course coverage begins right here at 2:30 on 97.3 ESPN. The first game lined up is the Texans versus the Chiefs. This is actually the game I'm looking forward to most, Mike, because even though it's close to a double-digit spread, according to the people who are making the lines, I think anytime you got Watson versus Mahomes, it's must-watch television.
No doubt about it. I almost feel for Deshaun Watson a little bit because remember his rookie season, he was kind of lighting it up and he had that terrible injury.
Yep.
And then he's kind of been overshadowed the past 2 seasons despite actually breaking out and being a tremendous player in this league. He got overshadowed by Mahomes last year, who will face off with in this game, as you mentioned, and Lamar Jackson this season. So you almost wonder, everyone's saying, okay, so it was the year of Mahomes, the year of Jackson. What will next year be? Is it Kyler Murray, someone else? Well, really, you could go back and say it started with the Watson year, right? I mean, that first half of his rookie of that season was incredible before he had that torn ACL. So the guy is tremendous. He carried that team on his back last week to a victory. I mean, the supporting cast was just awful in the first half. He had no time to throw the football. It was just a total mess. He turned the game around on his own against a very good Bills defense and won that game for them last week. So when he's on the field, obviously they have a chance to make this interesting. That being said, I still think the Chiefs get it done. I mean, Patrick Mahomes missed some time with injuries this year and was limited by injuries, and still the Chiefs are the 2 seed. Still, even with their star quarterback missing, this is a team that has really turned it around defensively since switching to the 4-3 in the offseason under Steve Spagnuolo. They're really good against perimeter receivers. That's the strength of Houston with DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. In fact, don't be surprised if Hopkins gets some additional run in the slot this week. They're going to have to. They have to shake it up a little bit. They have to do something differently to get him off of the perimeter, or he's going to be shut down. It's just the strength of this Chiefs team right now. So I think a lot of the matchup plays in the favor of the Chiefs. Also, they're at home. You add all that up, I think they win this one. I have about a 10-point victory here for Kansas City.
And then the final game on Sunday, Seahawks at the Green Bay Packers. We know the Seahawks, they didn't put up a great amount of offense versus the Eagles last week. Packers have had 2 weeks to rest, and really the key for the Packers this year has been the pass rush of the 2 Smith guys, and then on the offensive side, Aaron Jones, that running game. So can the Packers duplicate what made them successful in the regular season in this game versus Seattle?
You know what? I think this is a pretty evenly matched game on paper. I think I would probably give a slight edge to the Packers, but it would be a close call to pick this one on a neutral field. And certainly I think if the game was in Seattle, they would be the favorite. But the home field advantage is huge here. I mean, if you look back at the Russell Wilson era, I mean, the Seahawks have been outstanding at home, but not, probably a little above average on the road. If you look at the Aaron Rodgers era in Green Bay, they have been average on the road, but they have been elite at home. So I think that really could be the driving factor in the line and certainly in who wins this game. Home field advantage is so key, and that would have been the case, by the way, even if the Saints won last week and had to go to Green Bay. In that scenario, you might say, well, the Saints are the better team, but man, Drew Brees playing at Lambeau, this home field advantage is huge. And so regardless of opponent, it's something that has to be factored in. Home field advantage isn't always important for every game, but it certainly is in this one. So, the defensive upgrades for Green Bay in the offseason were huge, and you could sort of see this breakout coming for them. And that add that to the home field advantage, to Aaron Rodgers' presence, even though he hasn't been as elite as always, but even his presence leading this Packers offense, I think it's enough to get it done over this Seahawks team. But again, I say that with Russell Wilson on the other side. I mean, this team, the Seahawks aren't overly impressive on paper, but they have Russell Wilson. This guy is a star, and as long as he's out there, the Seahawks have a chance.
Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. Check out all of his work. Make sure you sign up for ESPN Plus to get all of his work, the DFS projections, the NFL projections all year long. And, of course, catch him on Daily Wager Sunday morning, ESPN2. Mike, appreciate your time and enjoy the games this weekend.
All right, you too.